Hey everyone, welcome to the texturing part of the Sword tutorial. Let's create a new project here. There's a good chance you have a newer version. They keep pushing out these updates. Gonna leave the document resolution at 2K and import our sword_low. Let's confirm that. And here we go. Here we have our low poly sword. I'm gonna switch it to orthographic view. I prefer to work in the orthographic view, same as in 3D Max and ZBrush. And here we have our baking settings. Let's scroll down to bake mesh maps. I'm gonna switch the resolution here to 4K. And I'm gonna disable our ID, ambient occlusion and thickness map, at least for now. Let's navigate to our high poly. And now let's just change the dilation width here. That is the edge padding that we gonna have around our UV shells. And over here, I'm gonna have the anti-aliasing to 8x8. And most importantly, match should be at by mesh name. So now let's bake this. And Substance Painter has this nice new feature where now we see in real time how we bake. And usually I like to fast forward these parts, but just to demonstrate how fast this goes, I can talk a bit about why I didn't bake the AO map at the same time. It's just a habit. Like the AO also got much faster now as it was in previous versions. But in general, the AO map takes quite long, and I like to change the anti-aliasing to 2x2 instead of 8x8. So I like to render that out as a separate map. And we're gonna do that as soon as these maps here are done baking. I also didn't choose the thickness map and the ID map. We don't really need these maps. The ID map would only be interesting if we want to make use of vertex colors or material colors. But here in that case, or in general, I prefer to mask everything by hand. And that way it's as precise as it can be. And that's what we're gonna be doing here as soon as this bake is done. And as you can see, it's really fast. It's quite impressive. And I love how we get that preview nowadays, which we didn't have before. So here we go. Let's confirm that. And now you can see that here under our texture settings, we have these maps baked out. So now we have to go back into the dialog, and I'm just gonna uncheck everything, and all that we have to still bake out is our ambient occlusion map. I wanna have secondary rays at 256 to have a higher quality. And I'm gonna have self occlusion to mesh name. And then here under common, I want to scroll down to our anti-aliasing, and I'm just going to put it to 2x2. That way it's going to bake out much faster, and the quality is still very good. So it's not really making a big difference, but it's baking much faster. And I'm actually going to fast forward this part here with the AO map. So you don't have to wait for as long as it takes, because it's still taking some time. So here we go, I cut that part out. And now we also have our ambient occlusion map here. There it is. And that means that now we should save our file here. As you can see, I already have a few files here because I was running some tests, which I always do when I make tutorials. So let's just save this here. Sword is what I'm gonna call it. And now that we have everything baked out, I want to do one more thing here before we get started. Let's go over to project configuration and swap out our FBX file here. So this takes a moment to load. And now we have this secondary FBX file, and we can then paint on that and don't have the horns in the way, and we see the inside of the mouth. So that is the whole idea. I'm gonna start here by creating folders. I wanna have 4 folders in total. I mean, at least for our base materials, there might be more on top later, but for now, I'm gonna have these folders here, and I'm gonna call them color 1, color 2, color 3. And essentially we have the steel, we have leather, we're gonna have a random color, and then we're gonna have color 4, which is the gold. So now let's just add another folder here on top. I'm actually gonna call that emissive. That's gonna be our glowing emissive effect later on. So now I'm gonna add a fill layer here, and I'm gonna drag it here into our color 1 steel. And for now, what I wanna do is change the color to something here like a blue. Let's put another fill layer here into the leather folder, and let's also change the color. I'm just gonna have some brown color here on it to resemble the leather. And then here on our random color, let's just put something that has a contrast to the other colors. So here on the gold, we could have some yellow. It doesn't matter at that point. We're not using the final materials yet. This is really just to have some color code in here, because the next thing we're gonna do is creating the masks. Also here on the emissive, let's put a color. I'm gonna put it to a bright blue. And now we want to add masks to these folders. Let's just make sure we are on the actual folders, not the material. And we want to have black masks. We don't need it on the last folder here, the steel. That is basically our base layer. So we're gonna start masking out here our leather folder. I'm gonna switch over here to the polygon fill mode. And here I'm gonna switch it to element mode, and then just click on our leather strap. Since it's its own element, it will just make a selection for the whole thing then. And now let's switch over to polygon mode, and we can then individually select these polygons that we have here. So we don't have to brush it all out manually. So pressing space and moving the mouse up and down will change the hardness of the brush, and swiping left to right will change our brush size. I'm gonna enable our symmetry here. And that is why we push the copied parts here out to the side like that. So that later when we want to do some work on, let's say, the inside of the snake mouth, we can just use it also together here with the symmetry mode. And as you can see, same as in ZBrush really, we're affecting both sides, and that means we're saving some time here. As we are masking out here these regions. And this is really the part of the work here that makes all the difference. So I'm trying to zoom in as close as I can and make sure to make that as perfect as possible. And I'm also not a fan of these color ID maps, because you will always have a bit of this pixelation on the borders. And I prefer to just do that by hand, put in the work at the beginning, and that way you know you have the perfect masks here. So sometimes that means that you go a little bit over the masking region, in which case you want to press X and switch the brush to a black, which then takes away from the mask. So it's just a matter then to switch simply with X from white to black and back and forth. And now I'm going to use our polygon tool here, go in the UV mode, and take away here from the leather information that we had on this part. So sometimes I have to test which color we actually need. In that case, it's the white brush here to further zoom in and make that as perfect as it can be here, with some of these pixels that otherwise we can't select with the polygon fill mode. So that's why we zoom in here and give it some extra polish with the brush. Sometimes it's kind of hard to perfectly get those pixels, so you may have to attempt it a few times. And what I want to do here is also zoom in, and then with X we switch back to demasking in case we went over the borders too much. Here, for example, we want to have our white brush to further go in there. And that means we have this leather part pretty much masked out now. Over here we also have the whole information. And now we can go over here to our copied version, the one without the leather straps. And let's continue with more masking work. I'm gonna go over here to this color free, click on the black mask, and I want to have a white brush here selected. Let's just test it. That works. So I'm gonna Control Z this. And I'm actually gonna switch over here to our side view, go over here to our UV mode from the polygon fill, and already select these spikes that we have here. And now with our brush, let's go in there and fill this out here along these lines, our high poly lines. So let's just carry on here. If you press Shift, you can also draw a straight line, very similar to ZBrush. Like here, pressing Shift will enable you to just connect point A with point B. And that way you don't have to manually draw every pixel. You can just make a big jump here. Same as over here. And then we can zoom in, make the brush a bit smaller and connect it here. And let's just make sure that we don't have any overlap, and then we can also fill that here in the inside. And now let's just carry on here to further fill this. And here we want to zoom in and be very accurate so that we don't affect anything there of that rem skull. We just want to have it here on that part. And now we can fill this empty region here as well. Let's take a look at it here from a different angle, and this here is what just happened. So we gotta zoom in and reverse our brush to a black and then take away from these pixels that were not perfect. And I'm just gonna use our UV selection here on the polygon fill. Let me undo that to fill in the inside here of the sword. And the rest here I'm just going to use our brush for. So here we go with the first masking on the blade. So let me go over here to our fill layer in the steel folder, and let's make a metal out of it. I'm going to crank that up here all the way to 1, and you can see how now it's actually metallic. And I want to change that color here to a brighter tone. Somewhere around here looks good to me. Essentially, it just looks nicer than to work on it. You can see here, if we crank the roughness all the way up, it becomes super glossy. And I want to have it at 0.3 in that case. So now it's just nicer to work on it, to already get that metal look. And we're of course not finished with it yet, but just so that we have something that looks nice as we work on it. And also it has a good contrast here with our other material, which helps us to distinguish it as we are doing that masking work here on it. Let's make sure to also grab these parts here in the center. And I'm just gonna fill it all out here up to that point where we have this edge here on the normal map at least. And now let's just put some more focus here on the ram skull. And let's put some of our masking here onto these regions. Sometimes it's good to just use a bigger brush and then we can come in and clean it up here. But just so that we target a bigger area. And essentially it's up to you where you want to put these masking informations. But it just makes sense to break it up in a way where it's interesting enough and it's not too piled up in one area. You want to make sure that we have some interesting contrast for the eye. When you look at the sword, you want to see something that looks appealing. I'm gonna make this a little bit brighter here and I'm gonna turn our roughness down so that we have a better contrast here. Let me get back to the mask and I'm gonna carry on here with these elements. And this is one of the nice things with this workflow that we did in ZBrush, where we have a lot of these trim brush edges. It means that we really have a lot to choose from once we get here to the texturing, where we want our color information to be and where not. And that is entirely up to you. But of course, since this is a tutorial, I'm gonna suggest that you follow what I'm doing. And then at the end, you can always make your own sword, your own axe, whatever it is that you want to do, where you want to use these skills on, and then decide for yourself. But in order here to demonstrate everything in the best way, I'm gonna suggest you follow along here, where I also put the colors. And in that case here, I want these colors to also wrap around that ring that we have there. Same as here. Let me also follow along here, where we have this curve. And then here, this detail as well. Fill it out. And this is just the time-consuming part, really. So the texturing course is 3 hours long in total. And a huge part of this work is doing that particular masking work here that we're doing here. So just be prepared that this will still take some time, but that is just what it takes. This is the texturing job. And if you think about it, 3 hours, that is actually not a very long amount of time to get a AAA quality texture out of it at the end. Back in the day when we had to use Photoshop to create textures, things like that would have taken way longer than this. So ever since Substance Painter came around the corner, and Quixel Suite and other PBR texturing software, this really changed the game forever. And nowadays we can enjoy working with this awesome software here. And essentially I wanna just, like I said, focus here on that ram skull for the time being. And I'm gonna also fill it with color here where we have the inside of the horns. So let's also mask out some parts here behind that skull of the ram. And once again, all about being precise here. And in case of going over some border region, like over here, we're just gonna make the brush smaller and press our X key so that we can unmask it. So here I'm gonna press X again to switch back to our white brush and just carry on adding more information here to these masks. So let's take a look at it here from the top. And what I want to do is, first of all, be with our white brush here. And I'm just gonna have a bigger size brush here to fill this out like that. We're gonna do the precise work later. But essentially, I want to fill this whole part out here that we have. So let me just rotate around here and follow this circle here, this circular shape, and also these tiny details there. I'm gonna mask it as well. On a second thought, I'm actually gonna take that away to make it a bit more stand out there. And now let's see where we can do some further masking, and I want to focus here on this part as well. So I'm gonna make this here green, and what matters is to really be precise here with the normal map that basically indicates us where our borders are. And that is what I want to fill out here with our color. Make sure that we don't overlap too much, but even if we do, we're just gonna go back in there, switch our brush to black, and fix it. And remember, you can press Shift, which makes it then precise to make a connection from A to B. And always zoom in where it matters, especially where we have some junctions, such as here, where we have the skull intersecting with the side parts. And I also want to mask this here in a more precise way. And let's carry on here with this part. I'm just gonna brush the whole thing here with the color. Let's also zoom in here. Select this there in the center. And now that I think about it, I'm just gonna color this here also. You could say I'm coloring it green, but then we're gonna change the color later. Green just makes for a nice contrast here on that metal, so that's why I prefer to have it in this neon color at the beginning, and then later we can just swap it out with whatever color we want to have there. So this part here, I'm also gonna mask it. And let me just get a different angle here on it. And on a second thought, I'm gonna extend our masking region here into this part. So let me fill this here all the way up here to this point, and then we can do some of our masking work here on that part as well, which is gonna look nice later on. Gonna make a nice contrast here with the metal. And this is how we create our texture here as we go. Let's bring that all the way up here to that tip of the wing. I don't know what else to call it. It looks a bit like a wing, doesn't it? So I'm just gonna refer to it as a wing here sometimes. And now we see that there is this second line here pretty much. And I think I'm gonna have that a bit thinner. So I'm just gonna demask or unmask some of the information that we have just put on there. to make that not so bold there with the color information on this part. So let me also zoom in, and then as I press Shift, I can be more precise here. And let's just see where we are here with this. That's why it's good to have these materials without any wear and tear on it in the beginning as we do the masking work, because if we would already put scratches on it, then you have a harder time seeing what you're masking, and we rely on the normal map information here as we are doing this masking work. Let me just go over here, switch our brush to white, and do some more color coding here. Up here on that spherical part. And here we have our center detail element. Let's see what we do with that. But for now, let's carry on here by doing some masking here around it. It's always nice to frame details with color. Always like doing that. Just makes it stand out more than later. And I'm gonna just switch to our black brush and take away some of the overlapping pixels that we have caused here. And on a second thought, I'm changing my mind. I'm just gonna mask this here with our same color so that it looks more like it's integrating there into this element. And this part here, I'm gonna mask it as well. So now this looks a bit more unique there and not just like this cubical element. I'm gonna also mask along this region here. And here as well. I'm gonna use the Shift key to make a connection up there. Pretty much same as in ZBrush. I think people who are familiar with ZBrush, they will also have an easy time with Substance Painter. I mean, most people already know Substance Painter anyway if they work with ZBrush, but for anyone who followed this tutorial and is new to the whole thing, I think a lot of it will feel familiar to you. And once again, let's be precise here. Always important to zoom in, especially where we have a lot of details. And this part here, I'm gonna not have it masked. I like to have this here as its own element that stands out there, these tiny knobs. Maybe we fill them later with a gold color or so. And I'm just gonna take that piece here and give it also some masking. Gotta be precise here. Don't want to go too much into our leather information here. And that's why using the Shift key is always a good idea. And like I said before, switching with the X key whenever we go over certain elements that we don't want to mask makes it very flexible to just switch back and forth here. Pretty much the same as in ZBrush with the Z add and the C sub. This is just the same kind of a thing here in Substance Painter with our black and the white mask. And I mean also in Photoshop we have this whenever you're doing the masking work. So that's really something that all these programs have in common. And yeah, creating the mask that is just the actual texturing work, I would say. I mean, the work that really makes the difference. Of course, later on we're gonna make the nice little details, but this work here is the one where we want to be as precise as we can, and that will just lay the foundation here for our texture and how well it turns out later on. That's why we want to make sure to take our time with it here and be precise. So here we have this ring element in the center of our leather grip, and I also want to have some of our color information on it here. And in that case, I'm gonna switch over here and demask some of these parts, which is gonna make for a nice contrast here. Also here, these two knobs. And once again, since we have our symmetry on the whole time, we do the same thing on the other side, so we don't have to do it twice. Also here from that side, let's add some information to it. And I'm just gonna unmask it around this part here. And these two knobs, I also want them to be unmasked, and also this one here in the center, I think will look good to have some contrast and no masking information there. And now let's take a look at it here where we have our snake head. And in the beginning, I'm just gonna be bold here, color everything out that makes for this connection part here that goes into the snake head. And that way we already have the masking information for this piece, and then we can be more precise and change our brush to black, and then we can unmask some of this information. Such as here, we want to be precise and make sure it doesn't go too much into our leather, so that it's really right there at the border. So here, let's also be precise. Let me zoom out, take a look at it here from a different angle. And before we carry on there with more details, I also just want to be already adding the color information here on this part. And somehow I just had it confused here with the brush. We want it to be the white brush. And just stamp it down here. And now I'm gonna use the black brush and take away some of the information here where we have this tiny ring, so that this one stands out there. Let's take a look. And let me just take a look also here at our sphere. And once again, this is what makes it then so useful that we separated that out here as individual objects. I always like to do that with my Substance Painter files. I didn't do it in earlier tutorials, I think. Back then, I was just always jumping then to the 2D view, which I still do from time to time. But in general, it's just a better idea to have these unique objects separated out here so that we can do the work on it without any interference or intersections from other objects. So let me also add this information here on it. And rotate around it here from the back. You will barely ever see that part, but let's just mask it anyway. And here on that ring, and let's see where else we can put some information. I actually want to take some of that away here, be a bit more precise. And let's see it here a bit more from the front. I'm gonna fill these knobs here with some of the information. So let's zoom out here. And let's take a look at it here from the top. And let's do some more work here on some of these parts here. So first of all, I want to have our mask here inverted, the brush of it. And then I'm gonna do some unmasking work on this element here. Just a tiny element there, which looks good if it's just metal. And don't forget that we still gonna add more colors to it. Right now we are at our color-free mask, and then we have the gold, which we also gonna add after that. And in general, the gold won't be as dominant as this color here. Gold is a color that I prefer to use to have them as some finishing touches, to use it as some accents. And that's why we're gonna do that after we did the masking work here for this. And here on that element where we have everything masked, I also wanna refine it and add some details to it here. Let's also unmask this here. And then with a bit of a bigger brush, let's take away more of this information that we added there earlier. Gonna use the Shift key here to be more precise. And let me also take away here in the center. Just so to have it stand out there more. And let me zoom in here from the top. And also do some more masking work. So as the next thing, let's focus on these horns here. And once again, it's good that we separated it out, because that means we can work on it here from all angles without having any intersections or distractions visually. That's why it's good to have it separated here in the model. And I'm just gonna color this here, this region. Use the Shift key to be more precise. And then of course do that all around here. So it's a matter of rotating around it. Let me undo this here. And then with a bigger brush, we can cover this whole region here. So sometimes it's just a matter of being precise where we have the borders. And if you already know that you want to fill everything that is behind the border, so to say, you just use a bigger brush then and fill out all the missing information. So let me see how we do this here. I think we may want to have this as a golden color later on. So I'm gonna just mask a little bit into it here actually. these rings that we added there. So it's okay to sometimes go a bit into it with the pixel information if you know that the other material that you add on top of it will override it. So that way we make sure that everything is sealed off entirely. And also here at the bottom, let's add some of this current color. And pressing Shift is our friend here. And here I'm gonna take away. I want this ring that we have there to be just the metal color for now. Maybe later we can decide whether we want it to be gold or not. But like I just said, I don't want the gold to be too dominant, so that should be more some finishing touches and accents. So let's also look at it here at our combined version, what it looks like. And I see that there is some information there that I don't want to have, these tiny pixels. So I just want to come back in here and fix that up here. And sometimes you might think like, okay, these tiny little pixels, they don't make a difference, but it all will sum up. It does make a difference in the overall composition. And just to demonstrate you, we can change the color to whatever we want here later on. And this is just what makes it so awesome. So if you want to have like a color like this here, go for it. This is really up to you. Personally, I want it to be a dark blue. And I'm gonna have it here at these settings. 0.01 on the R, 0.02 on the green, and 0.03 on the blue. I was testing that already in a prototype version where I was just already testing out some of these colors, and this one I quite like. I'm gonna put the roughness here to a 0.5. So it's somewhere in the middle. Not too glossy and not too matte. And now let's go over here to our gold information. And right now we only have this as a yellow color. We're gonna switch it to a metallic whenever we want it to be the actual gold. But for now, I'm just gonna make it a bit more bright here, and I don't add any metal information yet, just because it's easier here to edit if it's non-metallic. It's just visually easier to distinguish, as if we also make that a metal, which then would be metal on metal here, what we have to paint or mask. So let's keep it simple as long as we are doing our actual masking work. That is usually what I like to do. And as you can see, we are super flexible with our fill layers. It's just a few sliders and clicks, and we already make a gold out of this here. And once again, let's be precise here. I want to have this whole element here also part of that gold. So I'm going to come in here from our top perspective and also work with our Shift key and then take away some of these pixels that were kind of overlapping there. And essentially I just want to be precise here at this border. And then everything that's on top of it, let's also give it our mask information here. So this part here, we can all make it golden. And here I'm just gonna also use our Shift key to make these baby steps. We could also enable lazy mouse, which could help, but very often I find it more precise to work with a Shift key here to make these lines and tell it exactly where it's supposed to go. And here let's all mask this and use the Shift key here to follow it along this line there. And then with a bigger brush, now we're getting to the region where we don't see it thanks to our leather straps. And once again, that just means that we're gonna switch over here to our alternative model without the leather strap. That was the whole idea behind exporting two different versions earlier. The one that we were baking upon, and that would also be the version that you can import to a game engine or later to Marmoset. But here for our texturing part, we want to have these two versions with unique parts where nothing is intersecting. So I'm just going to make the brush bigger here and cover this whole area. And then I want to actually go back here to our color free and then add everything here so that we don't have anything missing there, that everything is tight there, waterproof tight. And here as well. So right now I'm on color free, I'm not on the gold. Now we switch back to our gold. And I'm gonna add everything here with the information. And here on that part, I want to zoom in to be precise again. And then here, let's also mask this out. And that already looks nice, but just wait till we make it a real gold. It's gonna look stunning. And here we go also onto these details that we see on the normal map and add some more information here. And like I said before, it's important to get these borders right, and then we can use a bigger brush and fill everything that's in the center that still needs it. And now is another case here for pressing our Shift key. I'm gonna zoom out a bit so that we can cover this whole region here. And then we want to do the same thing here on top. So I'm gonna take it here to that point, then just scroll over here to the other side and carry on with it. And then up here, and then just making sure nothing is overlapping. And once again, let's zoom out a bit and connect it here with a Shift key. And then also, of course, we want to make sure that the color free is waterproof here. So we don't have these tiny pixels there that are still metal. So let's just make sure that we got that all covered here. Also here on that part, just gonna use the Shift key. Just making sure we got that all covered here. And then let's go back here to our yellow and fill in the rest. And then we're gonna take this down here, this detail that we added earlier in ZBrush, to break up the silhouette a bit. And then let's use our Shift key over here to the left and carry on here all the way to the end of the sword. Or is it the beginning of the sword, the tip of the sword? I guess it depends from which angle you look at it. So let's take a look at it here. And I'm just gonna be leaving out this tiny dot here. I'm not gonna make that golden, so that we have a nice contrast there. Oh, let me undo this. So now we follow this curve up here. And also fill everything else that needs to be filled here. And you can already see that the blue color is right now having a bit of missing pixel information there. So that means we're gonna switch over once more to our color free in just a moment and make sure that everything is closed off there. But right now, let's just get these parts here done. Control Z is your friend. Sometimes you just overlap too much and then it's Control Z time. So I'm just gonna take a look here, like I said, color free random. And I just want to mask everything out here. Go a little bit over the borders because our gold color that we have here on top of it is gonna override it anyway. And now with the Shift key, I want to make sure this is as pointy as it can be here. And I'm just gonna zoom in here once more and really get this pointy shape right here. Take away a bit here from the information of the gold. And let's just take another look here over what we did so far. And here I want to add another line so that we have this perfectly straight there. And also here. So overall looking pretty good, but let's also zoom in here, and I'm just gonna take away some of this overlapping pixelation that we have there. And essentially let's just scan over here, just double checking that nothing looks like it's overlapping. And now let's add a line here that is also gold. So that's what we want to do. And I'm gonna actually turn on our lazy mouse for that. And this might require a few attempts. I'm gonna have a brush size here of 0.3. And let me increase the lazy mouse radius. I'm gonna Control Z. Gonna increase that even more, the distance here. So let's try again, and actually I'm gonna put the brush size down to 0.28, a bit smaller. And this time it worked. So here I'm gonna just use Shift. And then let me pan over here. And still with our lazy mouse on, I'm just gonna take this curve here and then connect it here with our Shift key. And I'm gonna bring the distance down a bit here on the lazy mouse so that we can make some smaller moves here. And that in combination here with our Shift key enables us to make these smaller lines here. Then up here And then I'm just going to connect it up here like that. It's going to be a nice detail here with our gold. Just going to zoom in here, make sure that everything is covered where we have these borders. So let's take a look. And then let's zoom in here at the front of the sword, of the blade. And here, in that case, this knob here, I want it to be all gold. So I'm gonna cover that here with masking information. And then this element here, I also want it to be golden. So I'm just gonna press Shift, and here I'm just gonna use the lazy mouse. And then with a bigger brush, let's cover this area here and make it golden. And that's gonna make a nice detail here to have this part gold at the tip of the sword blade. Just want to be precise here, make it nice and pointy. Pressing Shift here to add a bit more of this information here to our mask, make it a bit bigger. And really just being precise, zooming in here, making sure this looks good. And what I was just doing was actually a bit too much. I want to take away here from that. And I have the wrong brush. Let me put that here to a black brush. And let's zoom in to be more precise. I'm gonna take this all the way up here, and then with the Shift key, let's make this connection. And now this fits better here on that part of the normal map.